He's never fought us. Not us united.
Oh! I can so see that. That's it. Welcome to Under Two Capes, the premier podcast of the Comics League Network. It's just me today, and I'm going to be talking about something that I actually got an interesting idea on Taladia's channel. I'm going to be talking about the numbers for Superman and Wonder Woman, for the Superman and Wonder Woman series from the New 52, because I think there's a lot of false information out there about how well this series sold. And it's one of the biggest lies of the New 52, because here's the thing. A lot of people think that just because the initiative itself failed, all of the books failed, because that's not true by any means of the imagination. So, and this is coming from an article on Tumblr, by a very close friend of mine that I plan on collabing with on the channel again. Nice guy, if you're watching, shout out. So what she did is she took the Comic-Con numbers from from this series and compared it to the Rebirth Trinity book. Right. So she took the entire New 52 Superman Wonder Woman series and compared it to the Superman to the Trinity Rebirth and the Superman Lois and Clark series from Rebirth. And compared the two, compared the sales. And I think that this is a very interesting chart to look at. Anyway, Comic-Con was the only way to get numbers before DC left Diamond. So let me share screen. Okay, so here's what I'm looking at here. So what we first see is that the first issue obviously sold like 94,000 copies. And I believe at one point, according to Charles Sewell, actually, I'll go all the way to the top. Charles Sewell says, so Superman and Wonder Woman broke 100,000, and there's a lot of reorders already. So there you go. Tony S. Daniels saying that the thing hit 100,000. Now, here's the thing, and this was in 2013. That was very rare for a book other than Batman to reach that level. Superman, as far as I know, the debut issue broke 100,000 with lots of reorders. That's the thing, is that it's not true. First off, the New 52 was not a failure per se. It was a financial success and brought new fans, but to balance the loss of the other fans. I've said multiple times that the initial writers of their joint book, Charles Sewell, sales were just fine. Charles Sewell said the sales were 100% fine. And here's the thing: when the second creative team came in with rewriting Superman and Wonder Woman, first being just to create unnecessary conflict, that was a red flag. So that was Peter J. Tomasi came in. I believe that was issue 13 is when he took over the book, and he completely tanked it. Like, make no mistake about it, Tomasi completely tanked the book, which is unbelievable. And he did this because he's one of those original people that thinks Superman only should be with Lois Lane. And not even like what the fans wanted is what he himself wanted. And I'll go by, well, Jared, how do you know what the fans wanted? Well, let's look at the chart. So it says here, and also I want to read these paragraphs because it's actually really important here. Here comes Rebirth. Rebirth was said to not only be a nostalgia trip, but an apology to older true fans deemed the New 52 as a whole as a big mistake. It was supposed to rejuvenate comics. It was a lot of cherry picking and revisionist history and contrived storytelling. The initial creative teams even seemed to enjoy being petty, throwing jabs at the New 52, even using specifically Wonder Woman as a mouthpiece to force acceptance of the Rebirth status quo. This happened also with animation, when the producers admitting using Wonder Woman to justify the abrupt change of status quo and to like a certain character that's being forced into the lead now, with Wonder Woman being forced into the sidelines. The producer also said the Superman and Wonder Woman together is for younger fans. Well, yeah, wouldn't you want newer, younger fans? Yeah, she makes a good point there. Then, all the spiteful praise of Rebirth, the actual effect of it wasn't as good as they thought it was. It was empty promises. Below are the sales of Superman and Wonder Woman, the new 52 series, compared to the Rebirth Trinity book, the book that was supposed to be its better replacement. Worth pointing out that Trinity sales benefited from the earlier boost provided by a line-wide relaunch of Rebirth, while Superman and Wonder Woman came out two plus years after the new 52 Rebirth and sold on its own merit. So that's the thing. Because, and she makes a good point there, when there is a relaunch of a complete line, all the number ones are going to do very well. Because it's a new thing. Everyone's grabbing everything. Where Superman and Wonder Woman happened 2 years after the new 52 happened, because remember, that didn't happen until issue like 12 or so is when it's kind of started of Justice League. And that was 2 years after the new 52 started. And then the Superman Lois and Clark's Convergence spinoff was promoted as a highly anticipated book, The Return of the True Real Superman, and they slightly have taken the marquee of the original Power Couple, because of the first arc of Superman Wonder Woman was titled Power Couple. So bonus T, Superman and Wonder Woman also had less of a sales drop compared to both the new 52 and the Rebirth Superman Batman runs. So now we're going to go into the chart. We have your issue 1. It was at like 94,859, and we know it would eventually get to the 100,000. Rebirth Trinity, 93,769. Still respectable, not bad. Superman, Lois, and Clark, 35,000. Okay, so here's my thing. I've long said that here's the thing. The Lois and Clark relationship, at least to me, if you like it, that's totally fine with me. You're not insulting me or anything. I just think it's irrelevant at this point because the sales are reflecting that they don't buy the book. It's not interesting to people anymore because ultimately, like I said in one of my other videos, she's a damsel in distress to be saved. That's ultimately what it is. But and then we get to issue 2. We have like a 30,000 drops. Same thing here. Well, actually, this is, and I think it's 65. But the point is, so what we have here is it goes from 94 to 60 here. So still a drop. There's going to be a drop because newer to lower and then new books. But as I want to show you here, if you look at Superman and Wonder Woman, consistently, when you look at the sales, had a higher sales than the Rebirth Trinity and the Superman and Lois book. That's what you have to understand here. Because this return to nostalgia was supposed to revitalize everything. And as we're seeing here, it didn't. It really didn't. Because look at this. Look at this at the drop. Look at the sales comparison for Superman and Wonder Woman versus Rebirth Trinity and Superman, Lois, and Clark. This goes all the way down 20,000. It doesn't go above 35,000. I'm sorry, for a book that's Superman and Lois, that is poor. That is really, really, really poor. That is really bad. And then, all right. Then with Rebirth Trinity, which, by the way, I love Rebirth Trinity. That was a fantastic series, even though, yeah, they did make slights against SuperWonder and stuff, but that's besides the point. But if you look at this, even consistently, the series got better sales than Rebirth. Now, what does this show? Because remember, this is hindsight because these two series weren't competing. What this shows is DC had a pretty decently selling series and they canceled it, not because of sales. It was because of for one thing, obviously what this shows, vocal minority of fans on Twitter. And here's how I know that it's a vocal minority. Because if it weren't a vocal minority, these numbers should be better. Especially these numbers, considering this is Lois and Clark and this is Superman and Wonder Woman. This should not happen. That's what I'm saying there. Then we go into what Dan DiDio says. What happens is we get to Rebirth. We institute some of the things we felt were missing. But what also happens is you put in things that made you want to revamp the line in the first place. And things get stagnant again. Everybody says don't change them anymore. But the whole purpose of storytelling is to change and evolution. Yeah, what Dan DiDio is saying is that, okay, here's the thing. they wanted to do the new 52 to change things and like revamp DC, because you have to allow them to do that. That's the whole thing. These characters have existed for 70 years because these characters have been allowed to change. Let me put it this way. Post-Crisis Superman is very different than pre-Crisis. And the new 52 Superman is very different than pre-Crisis. And as is Rebirth Superman, is that you have to allow these characters to change. Granted, okay, so here's the thing. You could love a specific version of Superman, and that is more than your right. You are so entitled to have your favorite version. That is 100% sure. Saying I like this version. But take me for example. I like the new 52 Superman. That was the version that got me into comics. I also like pre-Crisis, who's actually pretty much a badass. I also like post new 52 to a certain degree. I like the Superman Reborn storyline. I liked a lot of those stories. So it's not like I'm a new 52 dude. It says you're going back to the old status quo. So that's what he's talking about. You're telling me you want us to go back to what made the line stagnant. Exactly. That's my issue. When fans won't allow the books to continue to grow and change and evolve, you have to allow them to do that, because otherwise they get stale and stagnant and the sales get bad. Because ultimately, here's the thing. People bring up the new 52 failed. Okay, let's examine that. It didn't fail because of the ideas. It failed because of the execution. Because what they did was, here's a fantastic example. So on Superman in Action Comics, Superman was written by George Perez, fantastic writer. Action Comics was written by Grant Morrison, another fantastic writer. So you have solid creative teams. So Action is taking place 5 years prior to Superman. It's essentially Superman in the t-shirt and the jeans and the cape, learning how to be Superman. So now it takes place 5 years, right? So what happens in the Action book has to be what happens in the Superman book has to reference what happens in Action. Grant wasn't telling anyone what happened in Action. So I mean, it's also on the editorial team to actually say, okay, so what's going on in this book so we can make sure that they're in sync. That's the problem. And also, there was no direction. It's not necessarily the ideas, because there were fantastic ideas in the new 52, like Superman and Wonder Woman. So going back to the old status quo of Premium 52 is why there was a reboot in the first place. Superman and Wonder Woman were still struggling in regards to sales and bringing new fans, although their stagnant comfort zone status quo was supposed to be satisfying to older fans. Rebirth has also caused even more of a convoluted continuity mess, and character dynamics are empty. Now DC is stuck with not only pissed off older fans that didn't get exactly what they wanted with Rebirth, but also alienated new fans. Because here's the thing. If you're saying that the majority of the fan base wanted this back, why didn't this book do better? Why didn't it? Because DC gave you what you wanted. They brought back in Superman's relationship with Lois. That's what this book was. In a way, bombed. Then you had Rebirth, Superman, Wonder Woman, and Batman in Rebirth. And also, this was establishing Superman and Lois being together. And look, it not once got to every single one of these issues is below the Superman and Wonder Woman issues. And that's the thing. This sold pretty decently. And if it hadn't been allowed to move on, and even it vacillated and it went up and down, up and down. That's the thing. That's the chief issue, is that if Rebirth was supposed to reinstitute DC, why didn't it do that? You had some good ideas, but the sales weren't there. That's why I think that's the point Night Sky is making. It's like, okay, if this is what you guys wanted, why didn't you show up for it? That's the issue. That's the thing. So, and again, Charles Soule and Tony S. Daniel have said that it wasn't about the sales. It was just because DC decided they didn't want to go with that because of a vocal minority on the fan base. On top of the fact, you also have certain writers of that would take over after Superman and Wonder Woman, bad mouthing the Superman and Wonder Woman fan base to hold up Lois Lane as the only match for Superman. But that's besides the point. So ultimately, what I'm getting at, This is symptomatic of a larger issue at DC, is that they have good ideas, good stories, and they sabotage them because honestly, it's the Twitter backlash that, by the way, doesn't translate to real sales because it didn't happen. It really didn't happen. and again, financially, this book worked significantly well, significantly better. So that's what I'm just gonna say there. So now, what's the purpose of doing this? The reason why I decided to do this episode is because I hear so many times in my comments section that the new 52 failed, therefore Superman and Wonder Woman failed. Okay, it didn't fail. Again, I want to repeat this point because this is a point that keeps being brought up. It didn't fail. It didn't fail. What happened? It brought in a ton of new fan base, and that was the purpose of the new 52, was to bring in new fans. It succeeded in that massively. Hell, I was a part of that. I came in, I came in right in Justice League 12, so around this time, but the new 52 got me into comics. And here's what people don't realize when they say, that's not my Superman, that's not the way he would act. But you don't realize that when I read that, when I got into DC because of the new 52, I went back to pre-new 52 because now that I was interested in Superman as a character, I wanted to see the other versions that had come out. So I read a bunch of the older DC work, and I liked it as much as the other stuff. I may have preferred New 52, but that's what this does, guys. That brings in, that's the way new fans happen to become lifelong Superman fans. Like, okay, I got him because of this. It's kind of like a gateway drug, if you will. And here's the thing, the fan discourse is what I think turns people off to comics and to this specifically. I was listening to a critical role, like between the Sheets interview with Marisha Ray, and she talks about how, let's say you're someone that wants to get into D&D, and you go, okay, I want to get into D&D, and then you look at the fan base, and you see like this fan base that bashes other people for liking certain things, or like does all the, or is like generally toxic to each other. Are you going to join that fan base? And that's the thing, and that's my problem, is that when you have someone that goes, okay, so here's the cardinal sin. When you have someone go, okay, I really like Superman. Okay, so what was your first Superman movie? Man of Steel. That movie sucks. You're not a real Superman fan. Or you're going to join that fan base if you're blasted for liking Man of Steel, but also liking Christopher Reeves. Liking two is possible. Liking both pre-crisis and post-crisis is possible. It's just there. And both are financially viable because of the numbers that I just showed. And that is the thing. That is the chief issue here. Is that DC had a solid book that was performing very well. And they went away from it because of an over-reliance on nostalgia. Now, don't get me wrong. Nostalgia is really good. Nostalgia is helpful because it helps harken back to older stories and stuff, and it helps because you can use nostalgia to a certain degree. Like with Kingdom Come, it uses nostalgia to essentially say this is not the way superheroes are supposed to act and stuff. So that's actually really cool. Just when you get to an over-reliance on nostalgia that you're not allowing the characters themselves to grow, that's when you run into issues. And that's where DC has run into issues because they had a successful Snyderverse, they had a successful Superman and Wonder Woman series, and then the over-reliant nostalgia portion of the fan base. I'm not saying the whole fan base. I'm saying the portion that won't allow these characters to grow beyond the version that they grew up with is like, no, that's not my character and stuff. And then DC misinterprets that on Twitter as that's the majority of the fan base. Now, to be clear, in the interest of intellectual consistency, I want to be clear, because I just mentioned nostalgia and stuff. I'm going to give James Gunn's Superman a chance because, hey, I could like it. Even though I'm a big fan of Man of Steel and Zack Snyder's Superman, I'm still going to give it a shot because that's what I'm sorry, I'm going to use this term. That's what a true DC fan does. They give everyone an equal shot and doesn't blast anyone for being a fan of a certain iteration of the character. That's the way it works. Because I got news for you. The Christopher Reeve Superman is not the only version of Superman that's ever existed. The pre-crisis Superman or post-crisis, that's not the only version. There have been so many versions of these characters. That's why I did a video that I'll put in the box that was basically addressing, I'll either put it up here or in the description. I did a video saying there's no definitive I know everyone says this is the definitive Superman. No, it's not. There's no definitive version of any of these characters. I'm sorry, that's just the way it works. Because when you have a universe, because definitive means that's the only version that will ever exist, or that's the only template that will ever exist. I'm sorry, it doesn't work like that. Because these characters have been existing for over 70 years now. They have to change with the times. I'm sorry, that's just the way it works. Because otherwise, do you want comics to continue to be this niche market? I think to a certain degree, the fan base wants that. I honestly do. Because there's a certain amount of like coolness, like, ooh, I'm getting a secret thing here. And to be clear, there's nothing wrong with that. But, well, actually there is. But there's nothing wrong with like wanting to be in this like exclusive club. It feels more exclusive. But this gatekeeping has got to stop because it's hurting DC. Because of this, they threw away a very successful series and went back to a creatively stagnant part of DC. And again, Dan DiDio brings that up. Yeah, Rebirth was essentially us going back to what made us want to reboot in the first place. That's it. That's just the way it works, guys. I'm sorry. That's just the way it happens. But to be clear, again, so to reiterate what I was saying, to reiterate what I want to say here, again, it's false to say that the new 52 was a failure. Because guess what? What was the purpose of it? To bring in new fans. The series itself, seeming Wonder Woman was popular by the numbers, more popular than Lois or Rebirth Trinity. So thank you to Night Sky for recommending I cover this topic. This is a fantastic one for me to cover on the episode. So what I want to do for the rest of this is talk a little bit more about why I don't like Tomasi's run on SuperWonder. Why I don't think it worked. Because, and by the way, the sales were still more than I forgot to mention this. Issue 13 is when Tomasi came on. The numbers were still better than and the Trinity by the time Tomasi came in. The whole series, even better than Superman and Lois, the Lois and Clark series. So the reason why the Tomasi run didn't work, and again, beyond the sabotage, I'm just gonna ignore that part, is because when you look at the series, it starts off okay. The first issue I have, excuse me, is okay. So during the time period of the story of this whole series, Wonder Woman became the god of war because she was at war with Zeus's first child named Firstborn. Ares got killed, and his power had to pass to someone. To keep the power from going to the Firstborn, she absorbed it and became the god of war. Okay, that's cool. In the last chapter of SuperWonder Volume 1, as a matter of fact, this is when she becomes a god of war. Clark's cool with it because he trusts her. He's like, she's Wonder Woman. She's not going to all of a sudden profit off of war. She's not going to all of a sudden crave war. Where in the first... Is it the first arc? It's like the first. I think it's like the second book of the Tomasi run. All of a sudden, Clark is like, "Why didn't you tell me?" And I'm like, "Dude, so you were fine with it in the earlier part of the story. What are you doing?" It's like again, and that's what she. That's what the Nice Guy brought up in her article. She basically said that when Tomasi came in, he put in a lot of fake, never before brought in couples drama. In fact, in the second volume, they just said "I love you" for the first time. So I'm like, there's no big like animosity between the two. And again, it was just to denigrate Wonder Woman in a way to hold up Lois Lane. There you go. Because most of the hate was directed at Wonder Woman. I'm convinced that Tomasi doesn't like Wonder Woman because of the way he treated her in this series. He could have done it a little better, but he was resorted to constantly having everyone berate Wonder Woman. It is like it in favor of Lois Lane is the biggest. Like, I'm like, wow, dude, you claim to be a fan of Superman and Lois, but well, actually, you claim to be a Superman fan, but I'm pretty sure Superman would not want you to denigrate one woman in favor of another. It doesn't work like that. So that's one of the many examples, because ultimately what it was is that and she said it perfectly in this article, Tomasi put in stuff that wasn't there before. And to be clear, that could happen. But here's the issue. That's bad storytelling. And here's how I know it may have been intentional, because Tomasi's actually a really decent writer. I loved his Green Lantern stuff. So I know the dude's a good writer. So I'm not, so he's not like a horrible comic writer. So I have to say, if I know you can write well and you do this, I have to have my suspicions. And by the way, my favorite Tomasi series is honestly the Green Lantern Corps series, because he did a lot of that with Jeff Johns. Jeff did the Hal Jordan stuff, but Tomasi did the core part of Green Lantern in the pre-New 52 and those 3 omnibi. And it was really dope. It was really cool. And he basically made them like a military unit. It was really cool. So, and again, I'm ultimately going to say that's why the second, like actually 3 arcs of Superman and Wonder Woman is like, what is going on? I mean, here's the thing. The arc with Vandal Savage taking Superman's powers and Clark being depressed and angry at Diana, but really angry at the world, that can be understood because Clark is going through some stuff right now. So if it were just that, I would be like, okay, I get it, but Clark is going through some stuff. Now remember, DCU was going on at the time of, I think Volume 4 was the one that, I just looked at my shelf. Volume 4 was the one that had Superman depowered. That was the DCU era where they said creative over continuity. And what that basically means is that do whatever you want with these characters in, like, I think it was action. Don't worry about syncing it up here. And it tanked. It was horrible. And that's arguably one of the sabotages of the New 52. So we had like Robot Bunny Ears Batman, but it was actually Jim Gordon Batman. And you had Superman on the Harley. So that could be, but the point is, he has more of a reason to be like a little testy in that line than he does in the next arc, which is apparently a prequel. I'm like, Superman would not care that Wonder Woman's the god of war, because guess what? He trusts her. He's like, why didn't you tell me? It didn't come up. I was supposed to say, Clark, I'm the god of war now. Okay. But it's like, he just, again, intentionally just looks like he's trying to tank the book. It's crazy. And Tevya, I know you like Pierre J. Tomasi just because he did Super Sons, but he's done other books but Super Sons. I'm just telling you that. And ultimately, what I will say, the tragedy of this book, of Superman and Wonder Woman, is that it is a tragedy of self-sabotage. It was a popular series. It was, and plus, whenever I ask someone, okay, so what do you think, Superman and Wonder Woman or Superman and Lois Lane? They're always like, actually, Wonder Woman makes a lot of sense. And when people, here's the thing, when a lot of people says, well, yeah, that's too obvious, or like that just makes the most sense. As a ding, I'm like, you're telling me they work better together than Lois Lane. And when people say, well, they're too perfect for each other, they never fight. Read the series. We covered it on this channel, all of the volumes. And I'll talk about how much I didn't, how I'll talk about all the problems I had with the second 2 volumes in that series. Now, in terms of where I want to take this episode for the rest of the episode, because I think that's about all the ranting I need to do with the Superman and Wonder Woman series, I'm going to move on to essentially talking about why the New 52 itself was a good idea. Because here's the thing. I've had this debate with people all the time that DC. Okay, it's because I had a debate that the new 52 that DC needs a hard reboot. Plus, first off, they're like, okay, so but you're gonna get rid of everything the fans care about. Yeah, but the continuity is messed up. It's convoluted as hell. It's not gonna work out that well. So that was the same idea that was happening in the pre-new 52 world. So essentially, DC editorial had one of their summits, and what they wanted to do, let's update Superman. Let's see what we can. Let's try to update Superman to make him more like relevant, because they recognize that Superman had kind of fallen out of relevancy. So what they did, they changed the costume. They basically created the new 52 Superman, one that's not married to Lois, one has Kryptonian battle armor and all that. So then all of a sudden, Jim Lee was like, wait a second, why don't we just take all these principles and apply them to the entire line and do a line-wide reboot, start at #1, make it like we never published DC Comics before, and then just roll with that. So they took a pre-existing story called Flashpoint. Well, a story that was being written called Flashpoint. It was just originally supposed to end with the Flash just arriving back on Earth, having learned the lesson that, okay, don't mess with time. But what they did was they made it so as Barry was going back in time, back to the regular world, Dr. Manhattan would be revealed, reached in, changed some things of the DC universe, and like changed it. Chief among them is that the Wildstorm and the Vertigo universe were brought into DC proper. This is how you get like Constantine in the DC universe. This is how you get like the Wildcats in the DC universe. So that's how you got that. And then what happened was, essentially, you had a lot of interesting things. First off, the characters were younger and less experienced. Now, with that younger and less experience, this is one of the times when DC didn't handle the new 52 as well. Doesn't mean the whole thing was a failure. It just means that, okay, so Batman and Green Lantern were selling. So they kept the continuity for those ones. The issue is, okay, let's take Green Lantern, for example. In 5 years, these characters have only been heroes for 5 years. That was another thing. They went, okay, for 5 years, Superman has been, hang on, I gotta, yeah, but essentially what it was is, what was I saying? Oh, yeah. So essentially, so 5 years. Hal has been Green Lantern for 5 years, and somehow he's had Sinestro Corps War, Blackest Night, Third Army, per se. And here's why that doesn't work. Because a lot of the heroes that were essential to, like, say, Blackest Night don't exist in the New 52 universe. It's like a lot of the heroes that would be brought back to life, like Maxwell Lord, don't exist. It didn't exist at the time. Or, like, I'm pretty sure Hawk and Dove or something like that. It's like a lot of the characters that played huge parts don't exist. So that doesn't work. And with Batman got even more egregious, because it was like, okay, so you've been Batman for 5 years. Explain, but Damian Wayne is the most recent Robin. Okay, here's the problem with that. What happened to Jason and Tim? Because you could always say, okay, he transitioned to Nightwing and then he went to Damian. But the thing is that Red Hood still existed. But to explain it, they made it so Robin was actually never became a Robin. He became Red Robin, which is stupid, because you lose. Because here's the thing about Tim Drake, which you got to understand, before Fitzmartin got her hands on him. He was like one of the smartest characters in DC. He figured out by himself that Dick Grayson was Nightwing and Bruce Wayne was Batman. Just because he recognized an acrobatic move that Dick Grayson did. So he put that together and then figured, okay, so around the time that this happens, you show up, this happens, you show up. So he put two and two together, in other words. So, and then Batman hired him because he's like, oh, that's great for detective work. And they became Robin. And part of the reason why he became Robin is because at the time, this was after Jason's death, and Batman was getting more brutal, like the Snyderverse Batman when he loses to Robin. That's why I say Batman kills. Yeah, because he lost Robin. So, and so at first, Tim goes to Nightwing and goes, you have to be Robin again. Batman needs a Robin to remind him of the light. And Nightwing says, no, I'm sorry, I can't do it anymore. I can't go back under Batman. I'm my own person now. But if you should be Robin then. So that's how Tim became the Robin. But in this one, it's like, oh, he's Red Robin now. Luckily in Rebirth, this is the one change they did in Rebirth that was good. When they said, okay, so now... So Batman tells Tim, I've always considered you a Robin. Don't worry about the Red Robin thing. So there you go. They fixed that. So my point going into this conversation was, how does Batman have 5 Robins? So wait, not only that, he's had his back broken by Bane. His city has been taken over by Joker clones multiple times. And the Justice League has been, actually, no, that was an New 52. But it's like, so Nightfall happens, War Games happens. Let's see, what else? Long Halloween happened. Long Halloween's believable. Essentially, I'm trying to see what other stories happen at the same time. But the point is, like, all these Batman stories happen at the same time. Oh, Batman Incorporated. So Final Crisis happens because Batman Incorporated exists. Now, if you look at the Batman Incorporated origin, it's because Batman went back in time because of Final Crisis, came back, saw that Nightwing became Batman. He's like, hey, you're doing a great job as Batman. This is an idea. How about I have global Batman? So that's what happened there. And I'm like, okay. So that's ultimately one of the weaknesses of the New 52, that they tried to add this. And it didn't work. It just really didn't work. But again, it still was monetarily a success. So moving on, what I am going to bring up is that, hang on, I'm just getting a text. All right. So moving on, when you get to, so the New 52 launches, it's actually did pretty well. And like the nice guy said, it brought in a lot of fans, a lot of fans, myself included. It was a sales juggernaut. But then all these creative decisions happen. DC is going to DC and sabotaged it. And then, this happened. Again, this goes back. DC self-sabotaged again. They had a good thing, and they self-sabotaged it, and then here we are again. But then, again, Dan Adio said, okay, so wait a second. Rebirth happened because you want us to go... Essentially, with Rebirth, we were just undoing everything. We were just going back to how we were when sales were stagnant. Part of the reason why they did the New 52 was because sales were stagnant, and you want them to go back to it? I don't understand this. And Dan, I don't understand it either. It just doesn't work. It doesn't make any sense, honestly. But I'm not going to rant about this, and I think that's a good place to leave this episode of Under Two Capes. For the next couple of minutes, I'm going to say we recently hit 500 subscribers. By the time this goes up, I will have already done the live stream for my 500 subscriber celebration. So that is on the channel if you guys want to go check that out. What I will say is that thank you to everyone that has subscribed to that and that has watched the channel and everyone that has helped me on this journey. Because here's the thing. Back when I was stuck on 32 subscribers, I almost gave up on YouTube because I was just like, you know what? It didn't work. I'll just go back to just doing the audio shows and everything. Then I collabed with Wes, and that did well. And I didn't anticipate to do well because what happened was it uploaded when I was out like running errands, and I already got 7 views. And I was like, well, that's new because 7 views in like 5 minutes is actually really good for me. And then all of a sudden, lads texted me like, dude, are you watching this interview? And it just blew up. And then all of a sudden, 32, 33, 34, 35. And all of a sudden, I was like at 50 subscribers. Then once I got to 100 subscribers, that's when I was like, oh no, this is big. And honestly, it's been an uphill. It's been all downhill from here. Essentially, What I mean by uphill, it means it's all been going up now. I don't mean it's like a struggle, really. But ultimately, it's been super fun, especially having like my co-hosts like Nick, Taladia, Jay Heat, Lad when he comes on, all the friends I've made because of this. And think, all of this launched, all of this because of one movie, and that is Zack Snyder's Justice League. That's why it has a little space on my shelf. One movie created all of this. This is the reason why I have this office. It's really surreal to think about that one announcement. May 20th is when all this started. And all these friendships I owe to this one amazing DC movie. And I will always be grateful. No matter what happens with the Snyderverse, I will always be grateful that at least we got the Snyder cut. And at least I was inspired to start this. Because this, honestly, has been a very enriching experience in my life. And I am forever grateful for everyone that watches the content, that enjoys and engages, shows up in the live streams. Everyone's been encouraging for years and years and years. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. And I look forward to what Comics League looks into at the next, when we finally reach 1,000. So stay heroic, everyone. Thank you again for watching and subscribing and listening to my rants. And I will see you in the next one. Thanks.